Hey everyone. So I had a request to do more videos on implementing the Zenity pop-up dialogues, and so in order to do that I thought it was probably best to use actual examples rather than just sit and go through a tutorial on Zenity. I'm sure there's plenty of other videos and forums that show you how to do generic functions with Zenity. To me, a better means of showing its use is to actually use it in a way that I would use it within a CyFlex related function. So that's kind of what we're going to do. I wrote this start flogger with errors script yesterday, and we're just going to go through this and kind of detail some general scripting technique ideas, as well as how to use some of these Zenity windows. So let's get started. For starters, what is Zenity? Zenity is a program that's offered by default on Oracle Linux via the GNOME interface. Previously in Scientific Linux and Fedora, we were using the KDE interface, and so KDialog was the native pop-up that was available there. And so you can install KDialog on your system if that is your prerogative and you've already got a bunch of KDialog scripts, but our recommendation moving forward is, if you're writing new scripts, to consider using Zenity instead, as it's installed by default. Similar to KDE, there's a website that it actually even looks fairly similar. Maybe Similar Linux folks put it together, I'm not sure, but it gives you all the different types of dialogues, and when you click on them, it's going to give you an example of some of the arguments and show you what they look like. So in addition to that, there's a man page, so you can just type man Zenity and you can see how it works. There's all kinds of different arguments you can go through. You can read about it on your own. You can watch YouTube videos, etc. So yeah, that's Zenity. In this script, what I'm doing is it's a start script for starting Flogger. And yeah, so let's just go through it. So we've got a header that I put in here that explains the purpose, and so what this is going to do is it's going to launch the Flogger application, but it's also going to display any errors generated by that instance of Flogger when it was launched. There's a nuance to that statement that I made where I said to that instance. We'll get into that later. The way that you use this script is you call the script, you give it a logger file, and you have an optional argument to give it the registered name. This argument's straightforward. If you pass it a registered name, we're going to call release task. Maybe I should put an E in that. We're going to call release task, and we're going to release that instance of Flogger. Make sure it releases before we start a new instance. So we'll just kind of go through. I'm actually going to start at the bottom. You'll see that what I've done here is I've broken the different things that I'm doing within this script into separate functions. And the reason I like to do this is the actual script execution gets done down here. And whenever I open up a script that I wrote a long time ago and I don't remember what it does, it's fairly easy for me to read through this and know what it's doing. So let's just quickly read through the actual script and see what it's doing. So first, we're going to get the number of arguments passed. That we can do with this line right here, where we take $pound, and then that's going to be the number of arguments that someone used to call this script. And we know that we either want 1 or we want 2. And so 1 and 2 are the only scenarios where we're actually doing the thing that the script's supposed to do. The other scenarios, we're just erroring out. And we're not just erroring out in the background, we're going to display this error message. So to quickly step through this, if they supply 0 arguments, then we're going to display an error message. The error message is going to say, you did not supply an argument. And then it's going to show the usage. what we're doing here with this plus equals is we're appending the variable that we created here with the usage. What is the usage? Well, that was defined up here. And so we just have this full description where we say the calling script, which is represented by $0, must be called with at least one argument. The Flogger file name you would like to start. The second argument's optional. And so, yeah, you can read that. It's to release it. The reason I'm doing this in this way, for what it's worth, I like my scripts to be readable in a terminal whenever I'm diagnosing why they're not working, or whenever someone else is looking at my script, I want them to be able to see it in a terminal. And then I'm putting these carriage returns in designated places to format the window as it pops up. So you're going to see later, I'm going to have a window that pops up with the Zenity no wrap argument, and what that means is that it's not going to automatically wrap. What does that wrapping look like? I will show you. So if I just copy this, well, actually I don't have to copy it and run it. You can see it right here. It's done word wrapping. So this is one string, and it decided that this sentence should be 3 lines, and that the file path is going to have syslog on the end following this slash. I think that looks horrid, and so if you pass it the no wrap argument, you can manage the formatting in such a way that it won't automatically wrap and make it look so horrid. So what we're doing here, yeah, we say you did not supply an argument, we show them the usage, and then we display that error message and then exit. The reason we exit is if they didn't give any argument, we can't start a flogger. We're not going to guess which one they want to start. If they supply one argument, then that means they just want to start the flogger. And what are we going to do? Start the flogger. There's a function up here that does things when you say this. We'll get into that later. If they give 2 arguments, that means they want to release the flogger, make sure that that instance of flogger finishes releasing, and then start the flogger. If they give us too many arguments, then they screwed up and we're not going to do anything because they clearly don't know what this script is supposed to do. And so we're going to display this error message indicating they supplied too many arguments, give them the usage for what they should be doing, and display the error message and exit. So this is the actual script execution, the meat and potatoes, you could say. Now let's start going over these functions. So display error message. One cool feature of Visual Studio Code is all you have to do is double click something, and you'll see all the instances of that in the script shown in these little white dots on the right. Boy, I love that feature. You can do the same thing with CyFlex variable names. If you're wondering, where all is this variable referenced? Or bash variable names for that matter. You can just double click it and immediately go, I bet it's here. That's where it's defined. More than likely, if it's a function, you're going to scroll up to the highest point that function's found, and that's going to be the definition. So what is display error message doing? Well, quite simply, it's just calling a Zenity error message. So it's going to look like this. It's going to have this red dot, and it's going to display the text that I pass it. That's it. We do have this no wrap. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier, where we make sure that we don't leave it to Zenity to format the width of our message. We format it from within the script with the /n carriage returns. These right here. So that's the display error message. So let's just quickly go through that path. So if we give it no arguments, then what it's going to do is it's going to check the arguments. These functions get defined, but they don't do anything during the definition until they get called. So we check the arguments, we see that it's 0, and we're going to display an error message and exit. So if I say start flogger with errors, and I give it no arguments, bada bing, bada boom, you did not supply an argument. That's this text right here. And then this is the usage that we wrote before. So if we then scroll up, we see $0, That's the script name being called. The reason I like to do that is I change my script name sometimes and forget to edit the script name reference from within the script. So I like to do $0. So we're saying the script that was called must be called with at least one argument, blah, 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 exiting. I put exiting up here. In theory, you could put exiting where it's called, depending on how you've got your script. But yeah, that's how that works. So that's one form of error. Let's give it arg1, arg2, arg3. So this is going to take us to the too many arguments scenario. You supplied too many arguments, and then the usage. Okay, still straightforward, right? Yeah, let's look at our actual functions that are doing things. So this is start Flogger. So because we're in Visual Studio Code and not in Edit, we can double click this and just slide up and go, okay, this is where it was defined. So a quick comment for those of you that don't know, there are local and global variables in a bash script. So here I'm defining local variables. Any local variable is only going to be available from within the function. Any global variable is going to be available inside and outside the function. So here you can see I'm calling Flogger and the $Flogger file variable. That Flogger file variable was defined globally down here. It's arg1 essentially. So back to start Flogger. So what are we doing here? We're capturing the epoch time, which is just a format of time that looks like this, and it's what the get errors command wants to see to know the start time. Then we do a sleep, we call Flogger, and then we do another sleep. These sleeps are needed for getting the errors from only this application, giving it time to enter into the database, and giving it time for there to be a gap between when you capture the epoch time and when you launch Flogger. So that's why those are there. If you take this one out, it will work some of the time, which can be super confusing. Yeah, so from the start Flogger function, the next thing we're going to do is check for specific errors. This is another function I've defined, and because I'm not in an edit, I can just scroll up and I can see what it's doing. It's calling the get errors command, and we're passing it the process name, or the application name, the epoch time, and the file we want to write the errors to. So what this is going to do is it's going to check for the specific errors created by the Flogger application starting at this time, which is 1 second before we called it, and it's going to write them to this file. The reason we're doing that is we want to display the errors generated by Flogger if there are any, and if there aren't any, we don't want to display anything. The way we do that is with this if statement right here. We use the -s argument to check that the file exists and is not empty. So if it is not empty, we're going to display the file contents. This is another function being called from within a function. And because we're using Visual Studio Code, we can just scroll up and find where it's defined. So arg1 is the file to be displayed, and arg2 is the title. And we're just calling Zenity again, except this time we're doing the text info. We're going to see what this looks like in a minute. We format the width and the height, and we pass it a file name for it to display. If I'm not mistaken, and hopefully I'm not, the text info Zenity window is super nice in the fact that it will, if there's so many errors generated that it takes more than 700 pixels to display it, you'll get a little scroll bar and you can scroll through all your errors. So that's the display file contents function. So let's do a quick recap. We're going to capture the time. We're going to call Flogger. We're going to check for the Flogger errors generated since that time that we captured, and if there are any, we're going to display them. So that's what start Flogger does. The other thing in this script is if we give it 2 arguments, then what we want to do is release Flogger, make sure it gets released, and then start it. So what does the release Flogger function do? Well, this should look very familiar because it's basically doing exactly what we just did with start Flogger, except we're calling a different application. That application is release task. It might not be intuitive to everyone, but release task can generate errors. It's a program. It is as flawed as any other program that's ever been written, and so sometimes it's not successful. But luckily, when it's not successful, sometimes, it'll tell you by writing an error to the error log, and that could be useful for you to know. So, yeah, we're doing the same thing here. We call release task, we pass it a registered name, which is the registered name of the Flogger instance that we're wanting to start. We check for any errors that are generated by release task, and if there are any, we show them. So, that's what that's doing. Wait for registered name to finish. What's this function doing? We're passing it 2 arguments, a registered name and the number 10, an integer. So because we're in Visual Studio Code, we can scroll right up to this dot and see where it's defined. So I've gone over this basic functionality in another script or in another video, so I won't go too deep into it, but basically what we're doing here is we're waiting for up to the timeout specified, which in this case was 10. And at once a second, we're going to check if the application is running. If it's still running, then we're going to wait 1 second, increment our counter, and then do it again. Then after this while loop is complete, we're going to do a final check, and if it was never successfully released, we're going to display an error message that tells the user this registered name failed to release when release task was called. Please, figure your life out and fix it, and then go on with your life. And then we exit. So, in a perfect world, what's going to happen is release task will be successful. This while loop will start, this if statement will get called, and we'll go straight to here and we'll break. This if statement will get called, and we won't execute any of this because it will have successfully released. So that's what this function's doing. And then we start Flogger. We've already gone over that function. So these are all the functions. These are what they do. So let's actually start a Flogger. So on my system, I've got some notes that I'm loosely following for this video. And then I've got this one instance of Flogger running already. I'm going to start a different instance with this script. So we're going to call start Flogger with errors.sh, and we're going to give it specs logger specs.errs. This is a logger file that I've got for the sole purpose of intentionally generating errors. So there's some missing variables and some things wrong with it. So let's see what happens when we just call this one script with this one argument. It launches the script, or it launches, well, okay, so let's verify that it launched Flogger. Let's do a send -p on Flogger now. Now we have this instance launched, or running, that I asked it to launch. And we've got this pop-up that shows all of the errors generated from this instance of Flogger. Notice that we only have one task ID throughout this whole instance, and it's the same as this task ID over here. That's because there wasn't another instance of Flogger launched at the exact same time that generated errors. And so that's the kind of nuance to how we're doing this with just the time. We're not passing get errors the task ID, which we could do if we did some diligent bash magic, but I didn't for this script. So yeah, this is what that pop-up looks like. Now, let's pass it the registered name as well. So the registered name for this instance is ERR_logger. And so this is going to be my second argument. So what should happen now is we're going to give two arguments. So we're going to execute this portion of the script right here. We're going to release it, make sure it finishes, and then start it again. So let's see what happens. Beautiful. So we got two pop-ups. And it's worth noting they did come to the forefront of the screen. In general, they do. Maybe they don't always. I haven't tested it, 2,000 ways, but I think they should always come to the front of the screen. So yeah, we got this error from release task, which we didn't expect. And then we got this same list of errors with these variable not found situations. And that's of course because I've got silly variables in here that don't exist, and irregular variables that also don't exist. So what's the deal with this release task error? Well, it's saying that it couldn't set the event. I'm gonna just go ahead and jump to the punchline, which is that this is a bug. It was successful releasing it. I've already created a JIRA for this, but it's a very convenient bug for the purposes of me making this video because it demonstrates that release task might generate an error. There's a few different errors that release task can generate. This is one of them, and if you're in a scenario where you want to make sure that the user knows that when you tried to release something it was not successful, this would be good for you to do. So we're going to hit OK, and then OK. We're going to again verify send -p flogger, and we do have it running. So yeah, that's essentially what it does. Another thing that I wanted to quickly point out is I threw this debug section in here. This should probably be like a short thing on its own. This will make it so that if you've written, you can put this in any script you want. You can just take this, move it over, change the file name, and it'll work. Ideally, you want to put it towards the top because then it's actually going to show everything that you execute. So I can take a look at this file now, and if you're familiar with set -x, it gives you everything that the script commands, and it expands your variables. So whenever you've got an if statement that does if and then a variable is less than another variable or equal to another variable, set -v is just going to show you that you checked that variable. Set -x is actually going to show you what that variable's value was. This is a helpful, it's so helpful. It's not something you necessarily always want to leave on because it's going to always be writing files to your system. In my case, I'm putting them in temp, so they'll at least be cleaned up at some point. This is backing them up. If you didn't want to back them up, you could just overwrite them. I'm putting this in here because I can't tell you how many times I've been troubleshooting HD Tranum or the run ESVD script for someone, and they're like, yeah, I ran that script 9 days ago, and it didn't work. Well, there's about 1 million reasons that it could have not worked. Some of them are CyFlex related, some of them are system related, and some of it could be that you didn't have enough error checking in your bash script. So putting this and then actually storing the files in the background instead of just throwing them away every time you rerun the script might help you in the scenario that you may want to troubleshoot a script that was ran yesterday. So this is a cool feature. Feel free to steal this and put it in your script. Yeah. And I wanted to show one other thing. So send -p flogger, So we've got logger specs.errors running here. What if we call this and then we give it the file name as an argument and we don't release it? So rather than calling release task, we're just going to call start script without actually making sure that the things we're asking it to do need to be done. It's going to execute and it's going to say unable to initialize. And then it's going to give some somewhat cryptic error messages that certainly mean nothing to an end user. A problem was encountered when processing the registered name. And then finally, the useful one. You've already got this program running. Why did you try to start it? So this is when it's a good instance to actually pass it the registered name and release it before you try to start it. And so that's kind of why this script was written generically to accept a second argument. So if you were calling this from a, from a bash script or from GPTest or from an operator display, it would be kind of good to give it this registered name so that it can release it. Another quick follow-up criticism I'm going to say of this script that I thought of right before I started recording this video and didn't actually do anything to fix is that if you were to bake this into a script and you were to call it during a go, let's say, or from a start script, another start script like start Unico communications, and you're using this to start a Flogger file related to your Unico dyno. If you call it every time and pass it the registered name, and it's not running whenever you call it on startup, every time you start that CyFlex session, you're always going to get this one error from release task that says, yeah, that registered name wasn't running. So if I run release task garbage and then type ERSP equals release task, you see towards the top, I'm going to get this error message that says I couldn't set release event for a task. Well, in this case, it's because it's a bug. So, take this for what it's worth. But in this case, it's because that registered name doesn't exist and it wasn't running to begin with. So, an improvement to this would be to do an isName ready before you run release task. And if it's not running currently, well, don't call release task, because what would be the point of that? So that's something that I would probably put in the release flogger. Before I called this right here, I would do something like if not is name ready and then $reg name. And then I would do this. And I probably wouldn't, I think I could just do this, because, or yeah, maybe this phi would need to go down here. I don't know. But yeah, that's an idea on an improvement. I mostly mention that to just get you thinking on your own when you're writing your own scripts on the general principle of don't write a script that's going to create errors every time it's called, or a lot of the time when it's called, that you then look back in your error log and you go, well, is that a nuisance error or is that a problem that I've created? Yeah, so that's it for that. I would say if you have any questions on this, comment on the video. You could also, in general, if you want any of these scripts, you could email cyflex.support@trplabs.com, and I can pass them along to you if you're not wanting to type them out yourself. But to some extent, it might be better to type some of this out yourself and kind of learn it and figure it out. So yeah, I think I probably will do some other video at some point on some other notification GUIs that you can do that doesn't have a lot of detail that's specific to a start script like I did here. But yeah, I thought that was kind of a good illustration of one of the ways that I use these Zenity windows sometimes whenever I'm trying to automate something and make sure that the operator knows whenever there's a problem. It also, in theory, shoving errors in people's faces as opposed to just letting them shoot off into the abyss that is your error database. It might help the situation where people actually are motivated to clean them up. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that. If you've got any comments, concerns, whatever, comment on the video, shoot us an email. If you know a better way to do this, comment that on the video too. So, thanks everyone.